Well, the North Gauteng High Court has set aside the appointment of NPA head Shaun Abrahams. The court also found that President Zuma is conflicted and his deputy, Cyril Ramaphosa, will have to appoint the NPA head within 60 days. Freedom Under Law and Corruption Watch challenged the decision to award former NPA head Mxolisi Nxasana a golden handshake in return for his resignation. The court found that the golden handshake was invalid and the money must be paid back. Nxasana resigned just ahead of an inquiry into his fitness to hold office after he failed a security clearance. He claimed that his removal was secured because the president anticipated that he would reinstate corruption charges against him. The court also ordered the amendment of the National Prosecuting Authorities Act. The ruling comes as the NPA considers President Zuma's representation on why he should not be prosecuted for corruption.
The interests that are said to be conflicted are the president's private interests resulting from the host of criminal charges against him, specifically given his concession and the finding by the SCA that the decision to withdraw them was irrational, and as against that, his official responsibility to appoint the NDPP in terms of Section 10 of that Act. The president argued that he is not conflicted because he is not actually facing the charges yet. The NDPP must first decide again to arraign him, since the charges were actually withdrawn. He submits too that Section 90 envisages the appointment of the deputy president instead of the president and not together with the president.
Well, let's talk about this a bit more. I'm joined in studio by senior political reporter Aldrin Sampear. Aldrin, thanks for your time. Okay, so to sum it up, a lot of big things coming out of this ruling. First of all, the settlement agreement was set aside and Nxasana cannot be reinstated. The appointment of Abrahams has been declared invalid and the office of the NDPP must be vacant so that the deputy president can appoint a new NDPP.
Yeah, certainly interesting time indeed in terms of politics and as well as this ruling as well, because in actual fact, it's the president's prerogative of who he chooses and who he appoints as the head of the NDPP. The Constitution gives the president that powers. But what Dustin Mlambo has done here, the judge president, is that he has looked into what happens in a case where the president is said to be incapacitated or the president falls ill and cannot continue with his duties. And he found that that actually the deputy president will then have to step in, and that's the legal framework that is given now, that the deputy president must step in and the deputy president must appoint the new NDPP. And he also spoke about this issue around the President Jacob Zuma's conflict, that there is a conflict here, considering, as it stands even right now, that the National Prosecuting Authority is sitting with President Jacob Zuma's representation after the Supreme Court of Appeals ruling on President Jacob Zuma facing the corruption charges. And the NDPP has to make a decision on whether those charges must be reinstated. And I guess that's the balance that the judge president wanted to strike here, that what happens now going forward, let's rather get somebody in who's more neutral, and that next neutral person would be the deputy president, Cyril Ramaphosa.
Yeah, I mean, it was a judgment that was a long time coming, I suppose, and the judgment highly critical of the president. So as you referred to those corruption charges, it does put a dent in his fight against all the state capture allegations and his appeal against those allegations. Well,
certainly, you know, interesting is while this full bench of the court did not find that the president acted unlawfully, it said Dustin Mlambo said that they didn't have an opportunity to cross-examine President Jacob Zuma, so they wouldn't know his state of mind at the time that he took this unlawful decision. The decision as it stands is unlawful. However, though, can you say that President Jacob Zuma acted unlawfully? The court didn't make that finding, but the court found that he acted recklessly and also found that Mxolisi Nxasana acted recklessly, and that's the reason why it says that Mxolisi Nxasana cannot be reinstated for this position. He cannot be reinstated as the NDPP. But then on the other hand, next week, we expect this court ruling around the state of capture report. Remember that President Jacob Zuma went to the court challenging the remedial action that was in then Public Protector Thuli Madonsela's state of capture report, that the president must set up a commission of inquiry that looks into these allegations of state capture, but it must be the Chief Justice who appoints the judge. Ordinarily, the law says it must be the president who appoints the judge. And now we await the decision on that. And remember that the reasoning that Thuli Madonsela gave at the time was that because President Jacob Zuma is conflicted, you can't expect him to decide on who will preside over the Commission of Inquiry. Yeah. And it would seem, though, as that this court ruling gives us some sort of indication as to where Dustin Mlambo might go eventually when they give that ruling, which is expected to be handed down next week.
And then the Deputy President, Cyril Ramaphosa, is there any idea of who he might appoint and what kind of pushback could he expect to get from whoever he decides to put in that place?
It's a very, very difficult one. And just looking at the response on Twitter as well, and some of the cynics already saying that, I smell a reshuffle coming, a cabinet reshuffle, because after all, it is the president's prerogative on who he appoints as the deputy president. But in the meantime, as it stands, Cyril Ramaphosa is the deputy president of the country, and this court has now ruled that he must make that appointment. We don't know who he might appoint, and the NPA has always made it clear, as well as even Shaun Abrahams has always said, that inside the NPA we have many, many capable people. But at least 3 people now have been struck of being possible candidates. Firstly, Nxasana isn't there anymore. The court has also made finding against, also questioned Shaun Abrahams' conduct, and saying that Shaun Abrahams has failed to protect the NPA and make sure that it adheres to the principles of the NPA when it comes specifically to cases relating to President Jacob Zuma, and also then made an example around the spy tape saga. So he's the second person who's not there. And the third person being Nomngobo, who has been on suspension. So 3 people, 3 senior people, 3 senior prosecutors who are not available as it stands at the moment.
Yeah. Very quickly, because we've run out of time, but could this ruling sort of make its way into the ranks of the branches, or what kind of message does it send to branches ahead of the conference?
It is an interesting one. How does Cyril Ramaphosa firstly respond to this, considering that he's in the running to become, running to become President Jacob Zuma's successor? How would he respond to this? What decision will he make? But certainly this is a dent on President Jacob Zuma's conduct, because now this is not the only court that has found President Jacob Zuma to be in conflict with what's expected from his office. Remember, even the Constitutional Court case around the Nkandla matter, also the spy tape saga as well. So there are a lot of court rulings against President Jacob Zuma. So this definitely does dent President Jacob Zuma's image. But does it dent brand ANC? And that's the thing that we always need to look at. It probably does dent brand ANC. And what happens in 2019, I don't know if it will have a major impact in the ANC's national elective conference as it stands at the moment. It would be a bit difficult, unless if we have a decision that's taken by Cyril Ramaphosa immediately, and then we will see how the branches might respond to that. But the court has given him 60 days to do that, so that 60 days could be sometime next year in February.
Very interesting. We'll have to wait and see what happens. Aldrin, thank you so much. Aldrin Sampier with us unpacking that judgment for us that's just come out of the North Gauteng High Court.